The Galactic Military Academy on Kepler 442b buzzed with the nervous energy of new recruits from 17 different species. Among the towering Krillian warriors with their chitinous armor and the graceful Zanari with their luminescent skin, Dr. Sarah Chen moved quietly through the medical bay. She was the only human on staff, a fact that hadn't gone unnoticed by either the cadets or her colleagues. Sarah had earned her position through sheer merit. Her medical research on cross-species physiology had revolutionized battlefield medicine, making her one of the most sought-after xenobiologists in the galaxy. Yet here, surrounded by beings who viewed humans as a relatively new and untested species, she often felt the weight of proving herself daily. The morning started like any other until the emergency klaxon shattered the Academy's routine. A training exercise had gone catastrophically wrong. Sarah grabbed her field kit and rushed toward the landing pad where a transport was bringing in casualties from the combat simulation grounds. As the ship's doors hissed open, Sarah's trained eye quickly assessed the situation. Most injuries were minor: cuts, bruises, and the occasional broken bone that could be treated with standard medical protocols. But then she saw him. Tucked against the far wall of the transport, a young Zilani cadet sat hunched over, his normally silver skin now a sickly gray-green. The Zilani were known for their incredible speed and agility, but this one was clearly in severe distress. What caught Sarah's attention wasn't just his obvious pain, but the way the other cadets seemed to be avoiding him. Among the Zilani, showing weakness was considered deeply shameful. Their culture prized strength and endurance above all else, and any sign of vulnerability could result in social ostracism. Sarah had studied their customs extensively, understanding that this young cadet was likely suffering in silence rather than admit to his pain. The other medical staff were busy with the more vocal patients, a Krillian shouting about his damaged wing membrane, two Zanari arguing about who was responsible for their collision during the exercise. Sarah noticed that none of them had even approached the Zilani cadet. Moving closer, Sarah could see the telltale signs of internal bleeding. The cadet's breathing was shallow and rapid, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to maintain his stoic facade. In Zilani physiology, their silver skin color came from a unique circulatory system that ran close to the surface. When it turned gray-green, it meant severe internal trauma. "Cadet," Sarah said softly in the Zilani language, kneeling down beside him. The young alien's eyes widened in surprise. Few non-Zilani bothered to learn their complex tonal language. He tried to straighten up, clearly attempting to appear uninjured. "I am fine, Doctor. Please attend to others who need your help more urgently." Sarah could see right through his brave front, the way he favored his left side, the slight tremor in his voice, the barely perceptible wince when he spoke, all signs that screamed of serious internal injuries. "What's your name?" she asked gently, still speaking in his native tongue. "Cadet Threnka, ma'am. 3rd year, combat specialization." Sarah nodded, noting how young he looked even by Zilani standards, probably barely 18 standard years old. "Threnka, I need you to trust me. I can see you're hurt, and pretending otherwise isn't going to help anyone." The young cadet's facade cracked slightly. I cannot show weakness. It would bring dishonor to my family, to my unit." Understanding flooded through Sarah. The Zilani military tradition was built on the concept of silent endurance. Warriors who showed pain or asked for help were often dismissed from service in disgrace. But Sarah also knew that without immediate treatment, this cadet would likely die from his internal injuries. She looked around quickly, noting that the other medical staff were still occupied with the more obvious casualties. The transport was mostly empty now except for the two of them. Providing a moment of privacy, "Threnka," she said, switching back to standard Galactic but keeping her voice low and gentle. "Sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is allow someone to help them fight a battle they cannot win alone." The young Zilani looked at her with confusion and hope warring in his large, dark eyes. Sarah could see he was struggling between his cultural conditioning and his survival instinct. Without waiting for permission, Sarah began her examination, her movements quick but gentle. Her scanner revealed what she had suspected: significant internal bleeding and damage to multiple organs. The cadet needed immediate surgery, but more importantly, he needed to be moved without anyone else realizing the severity of his condition. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of calling for emergency protocols that would draw attention to the cadet's critical state, she quietly began administering emergency treatment right there in the transport. She worked with the efficiency and precision that had made her reputation, using portable equipment to stabilize his condition. "Why are you helping me?" Threnka whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah looked up from her work, meeting his eyes directly. Because sometimes healing happens not in the bright lights of a surgical theater, but in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. Sometimes the most important medicine is simply being seen. As she worked to save his life in the shadows of the transport, neither of them realized that this moment would become the foundation of a legend that would spread throughout the academy and beyond. 3 hours later, Sarah emerged from the medical bay's surgical suite, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders. The surgery had been successful, but it had been touch and go for most of the procedure. Threnka's injuries had been worse than even her initial scans had revealed. 3 ruptured organs, massive internal bleeding, and severe trauma to his nervous system. What troubled Sarah most wasn't the complexity of the surgery, but the circumstances that had led to it. During the operation, she had discovered that Threnka's injuries weren't entirely from the training accident. Some of the damage showed signs of being older, suggesting that the young cadet had been hiding previous injuries and continuing to train, despite being in pain. As she cleaned up, Sarah reflected on what she knew about Zalani culture. Their society was built on a rigid hierarchy where showing weakness could result in exile from one's family unit. Young Zalani males were expected to endure incredible hardships to prove their worth as warriors. The pressure to succeed, to never falter, was enormous. The medical bay's doors slid open and Chief Medical Officer Vex Torin entered. The Krillian stood nearly 8 feet tall, his insectoid features impressive and intimidating. Despite his imposing appearance, Sarah had found him to be fair and professional, though he maintained a certain distance from the human doctor. Dr. Chen, his voice buzzed with the characteristic Krillian harmonic undertones. "I reviewed the surgical report on Cadet Threnka. Impressive work given the circumstances." Sarah nodded, sensing there was more to this conversation. "Thank you, sir. The cadet should make a full recovery, though he'll need at least 3 weeks of restricted activity." "That's what concerns me," Vex Torin continued, his compound eyes studying her carefully. "The cadet's unit commander has already filed a request to have him transferred to non-combat duties, permanently." The implications hit Sarah immediately. In Zalani culture, such a transfer was tantamount to declaring the individual unfit for honor. It would follow Threnka for the rest of his life, affecting everything from his career prospects to his ability to find a mate within his species. "Sir, with respect, that seems premature. The cadet's injuries are treatable, and with proper rehabilitation." Dr. Chen, the chief medical officer, interrupted. "I understand your concern, but you must understand the broader implications. The Zalani representative on the Academy Board has made it clear that they cannot afford to have warriors who require extensive medical intervention." Sarah felt a familiar frustration building. This wasn't about Threnka's abilities or potential for recovery. This was about politics, about maintaining the image of Zalani strength and invulnerability. After Vex Torin left, Sarah found herself standing outside Threnka's recovery room. Through the transparent aluminum window, she could see the young cadet lying still, his silver skin slowly returning to its normal coloration as his body healed. But she could also see the defeat in his posture, even in sleep. She entered quietly, checking his vital signs and adjusting his medication levels. As she worked, Threnka's eyes opened, immediately trying to focus on her face. "Doctor," he whispered, his voice still weak from the anesthesia. "How bad is it?" Sarah had always believed in honest communication with her patients, but this situation required delicacy. "Your injuries were serious, but you're going to recover fully. With time and proper rehabilitation, you'll be back to your normal physical capabilities." Relief flickered in the young cadet's eyes, followed quickly by concern. "How long before I can return to active training?" "At least 3 weeks, possibly longer." "Your body needs time to heal properly." The silence that followed spoke volumes. Sarah could see Threnka doing the calculations in his head, understanding what 3 weeks of medical leave would mean for his standing in the program and his future with his unit. "They're going to transfer me out, aren't they?" he asked finally. Sarah considered her words carefully. There are people who think that might be best. Yes, then I've failed. The words came out flat, emotionless, but Sarah could see the pain behind them. You haven't failed anything, Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with the intensity of her response. You survived injuries that would have killed most beings. You endured pain that would have broken stronger individuals. That's not failure, that's courage. Threnka looked at her with confusion. But I showed weakness. I needed help. In my culture, your culture values strength and endurance, Sarah interrupted gently. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is heal properly, completely, so you can fight another day. Over the following days, Sarah found herself spending more time in Threnka's room than was strictly necessary for his medical care. She brought him academic materials so he wouldn't fall behind in his studies, helped him communicate with his family without revealing the full extent of his injuries, and most importantly, listened as he talked about his fears and dreams. Through these conversations, Sarah learned more about the pressure facing young Zilani warriors. Threnka was the first male in his family line to be accepted into the Galactic Military Academy. His success or failure would determine not only his own future, but also his family's standing in their community. My younger siblings look up to me, he confided one evening as Sarah changed his bandages. If I fail here, if I'm transferred out in disgrace, it will affect their opportunities too. Sarah found herself thinking about Threnka's situation long after her shifts ended. The more she learned about Zilani society, the more she realized that the current system was fundamentally broken. Young warriors were being pushed beyond their limits, hiding injuries and sacrificing their long-term health for short-term appearances of strength. As a doctor, she had sworn an oath to do no harm. But watching talented young beings like Threnka face career destruction because they had the courage to heal properly felt like a violation of everything she believed in. It was then that Sarah began to formulate a plan. If the system wouldn't change to protect its warriors, then perhaps the warriors needed to learn how to navigate the system more effectively. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was up against. Sarah spent her off-duty hours in the Academy's archives, researching everything she could about Zilani military traditions and the Academy's policies regarding medical leave and transfers. What she discovered was troubling but not surprising. The Galactic Military Academy had been designed by committee, with each species contributing their own cultural values and military traditions. The result was a patchwork system that often favored the loudest voices rather than the most effective practices. The Zilani, with their emphasis on silent endurance, had been consistently disadvantaged by policies that favored more vocal species. More disturbing was what Sarah found in the medical records. Over the past 5 years, 17 Zilani cadets had been transferred to non-combat roles due to medical issues. Of those, 14 had been cases where early intervention could have prevented the need for transfer. The pattern was clear. Young Zilani were hiding injuries until they became career-ending problems. Sarah also discovered something else. Buried in the Academy's charter was a provision that few people knew about: the Medical Advocate Protocol. It allowed senior medical staff to intervene in cases where cultural factors were preventing proper medical care. The catch was that it required the support of at least 3 department heads and had only been used twice in the Academy's history. As Threnka's recovery progressed, Sarah noticed changes in the medical bay. Other Zilani cadets began finding excuses to visit, ostensibly to check on their classmate but really to observe how Sarah was treating him. They watched as she explained his progress, how she worked with him on rehabilitation exercises, and most importantly, how she treated him with dignity despite his vulnerable state. Word began to spread through the Academy's Zilani population about the human doctor who had saved Threnka not just physically, but professionally. Unlike their own medical traditions, which emphasized quick treatment and rapid return to duty, regardless of long-term consequences, Sarah's approach focused on complete healing and sustainable recovery. The first test of Sarah's growing reputation came when a second-year Zilani cadet named Velsira arrived at the medical bay with what she claimed was a minor training injury, but Sarah's experienced eye immediately recognized the signs of something more serious. Velsira had been hiding a chronic condition that was slowly degrading her nervous system. The Zilani military tradition would have demanded she continue training until the condition became catastrophic. at which point she would be quietly discharged in shame. Instead, Sarah took the same approach she had with Threnka. She treated Velsira with discretion and respect, addressing not just the immediate symptoms but the underlying condition. More importantly, she worked with the cadet to develop a long-term treatment plan that would allow her to continue her military career while managing her health. "Why do you help us?" Velsira asked during one of her treatment sessions. "Your own species has no tradition of silent endurance. You could simply report our conditions and let the system handle us." Sarah considered the question carefully. "Because I've learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on training grounds or battlefields, but in quiet moments when someone's future hangs in the balance." As word of Sarah's approach spread, more Zilani cadets began seeking her out. They came with injuries they had been hiding, conditions they had been enduring in silence, and problems they had been afraid to admit. Each case reinforced Sarah's growing understanding of how the Academy's system was failing an entire species. The situation came to a head when Instructor Kethvar, a senior Zilani officer and war hero, arrived at the medical bay unannounced. Sarah had heard about Kethvar. He was a legend among the Zilani, a warrior who had never shown weakness and never asked for help. His presence at the medical bay sent shockwaves through the Academy. "Dr. Chen," his voice carried the authority of decades of command experience. "I need to speak with you." They met in Sarah's office, where Kethvar's imposing presence seemed to fill the entire space. Despite his fearsome reputation, Sarah noticed the subtle signs of chronic pain that he was working to hide. "I have been watching your work with our cadets," he began formally. "You have been treating them with methods that are unusual." Sarah braced herself for criticism or disciplinary action. Instead, Kethvar continued, "These methods appear to be more effective than our traditional approaches." The admission seemed to cost him considerable effort. Sarah realized this was probably the first time in his career that the famous instructor had acknowledged any limitation in Zilani methods. "I have 3 cadets in my advanced combat unit," Kethvar continued. "All 3 are hiding injuries that will likely end their careers if not properly addressed. They refuse treatment because they fear shame. They respect me, but they will not show weakness to me." He paused, and Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across his usually stoic features. "However, they speak of you with something I have rarely heard in their voices when discussing medical treatment: hope." He met Sarah's eyes directly. "I am formally requesting that you evaluate my cadets and provide whatever treatment you believe is necessary." The request was unprecedented. A senior Zilani instructor was essentially asking a human doctor to override traditional Zilani military medicine. More than that, he was trusting her with the careers and lives of cadets under his command. "Instructor Kethvar," Sarah said carefully, "I would be honored to help your cadets, but I want to be clear about my methods. I won't just treat symptoms and send them back to duty. I focus on complete healing and sustainable practices." "I understand," Kethvar replied. "I have observed your results. Cadet Threnka has not only recovered fully from injuries that should have ended his career, but he has returned to training stronger than before. This suggests that your methods, while unconventional, are highly effective." As Kethvar prepared to leave, he turned back to Sarah. "Dr. Chen, there is something else you should know. The Academy Board has been discussing your influence on our cadets. Some view it favorably. Others see it as interference with traditional methods." "And you?" Sarah asked. For the first time since entering her office, Kethvar's stern expression softened slightly. "I see it as evolution. The strongest survive not by refusing to adapt, but by learning from new environments and challenges." With those words, Sarah realized that her quiet work in the medical bay was about to become much more visible and much more controversial. The Academy Board meeting was scheduled for 800 Standard Time, and Sarah found herself arriving early, reviewing her notes one final time. Chief Medical Officer Vex Toran had informed her the previous day that her unconventional treatment protocols had drawn official attention. The boardroom was an impressive circular chamber with delegates from each member species of the Galactic Alliance arranged around a central platform. Sarah recognized most of them from Academy briefings. Admiral Thresh Ka, the Zilani representative and Instructor Kethvar's superior officer, General Hollowtooth representing the Krillian Military Command, and Chancellor Brightwing from the Zanari delegation, among others. What Sarah hadn't expected was to see several cadets seated in the observation area, including Threnka, Velsira, and 3 others she recognized from recent medical consultations. Their presence suggested this meeting was more significant than she had initially realized. Admiral Threshka called the meeting to order, his voice carrying the crisp authority typical of senior Zilani officers. We are here to address concerns regarding the medical protocols being implemented by Dr. Sarah Chen, specifically as they relate to Zilani military traditions and academy standards. General Hollowtooth was the first to speak, his massive form shifting as he leaned forward. The Krillian delegation has reviewed Dr. Chen's medical records. Her success rate with cross-species trauma treatment is exceptional. We see no cause for concern. The issue, Admiral Threshka responded, is not medical competency. It is cultural interference. Dr. Chen's methods appear to be undermining fundamental Zilani military values. Sarah felt a chill at those words. She had been expecting criticism, but the formal accusation of cultural interference could end her career at the Academy. Chancellor Brightwing's melodious voice filled the chamber. Perhaps Dr. Chen should be allowed to explain her methods and their rationale. Sarah stood grateful for the Zanari representative's intervention. Thank you, Chancellor. My approach to treating Zilani cadets has been based on medical necessity, not cultural bias. I've observed a pattern of hidden injuries and delayed treatment that poses serious risks to cadet health and career longevity. Admiral Threshka's expression remained stern. Dr. Chen, silent endurance is a cornerstone of Zilani warrior culture. It has served us well for millennia. Your encouragement of cadets to seek treatment for minor discomforts undermines this tradition. With respect, Admiral, Sarah replied, I haven't been treating minor discomforts. I've been addressing serious medical conditions that could have resulted in permanent disability or death if left untreated. She activated her portable display, showing anonymized medical data from the past month. These statistics represent 17 Zilani cadets who sought treatment under current protocols. Of those, 12 were suffering from conditions that had progressed far beyond what was necessary due to delayed intervention. The display showed clear trends: faster recovery times, improved long-term outcomes, and most significantly, 0 career-ending injuries among cadets who had received early treatment. General Hollowtooth studied the data with interest. These outcomes are superior to our own medical standards. What methods are you using that differ from standard protocols? The primary difference isn't medical technique, Sarah explained. It's approach. Instead of treating injuries as temporary obstacles to overcome, I treat them as opportunities for improvement. Full healing, proper rehabilitation, and education about injury prevention. Admiral Threshka's compound eyes narrowed. And you believe this approach is compatible with military discipline? Before Sarah could respond, a voice came from the observation area. Permission to speak, Admiral. Sarah turned to see Instructor Kethvar standing among the cadets. Admiral Threshka looked surprised but nodded permission. Admiral, I have been observing Dr. Chen's methods with my own cadets, Kethvar began, his voice carrying across the chamber. I initially shared your concerns about cultural interference. He paused, and Sarah could see the weight of what he was about to say. However, I have concluded that Dr. Chen's approach does not undermine Zilani values. It enhances them. The cadets under her care have not become weak or dependent. They have become stronger, more resilient, and more capable warriors. The boardroom fell silent. Instructor Kethvar's reputation was unassailable, and his public support of Sarah's methods carried enormous weight. Furthermore, Kethvar continued, I believe Dr. Chen's approach represents an evolution of our traditions rather than an abandonment of them. True strength includes the wisdom to heal properly, to fight smarter, and to maintain peak capability over the long term. Admiral Threshka looked troubled by this unexpected development. Instructor Kethvar, you are suggesting that centuries of Zilani military tradition should be modified based on the recommendations of a human physician? I am suggesting that our traditions should grow stronger through integration with proven effective practices, Kethvar replied. Dr. Chen has demonstrated that respect for warrior culture and optimal medical care are not mutually exclusive. Chancellor Brightwing leaned forward with interest. Instructor, can you provide specific examples of these improved outcomes? Kethvar gestured toward the observation area. Cadet Threnka returned to active duty 6 weeks ago. His performance scores are now 20% higher than before his injury. Cadet Velsira has not only continued her training, but has been selected for advanced tactical studies. These results speak for themselves. General Hollowtooth rumbled his approval. Outcomes-based evidence is the foundation of effective military medicine. If Dr. Chen's methods produce superior results, perhaps we should be discussing expansion rather than restriction. The dynamics in the room were shifting, but Sarah could see that Admiral Threshka remained unconvinced. The Zelani representative was clearly struggling between traditional values and undeniable evidence. Sarah decided to take a risk. "Admiral, may I suggest a formal trial period? Select a control group of Zelani cadets and allow me to demonstrate that my methods enhance, rather than undermine, warrior culture." "What kind of trial?" Admiral Threshka asked cautiously. "A comprehensive evaluation over the remainder of the academic year. Compare outcomes between cadets treated with traditional methods and those treated with my integrated approach. Let the results determine policy." The proposal hung in the air as the board members considered its implications. Sarah knew she was betting her career on her ability to prove that compassionate medicine and warrior culture could not only coexist, but strengthen each other. Finally, Admiral Threshka spoke. "Very well, Dr. Chen. You will have your trial period. But understand that if your methods prove detrimental to Zelani military readiness, the consequences will extend far beyond your personal career." As the meeting adjourned, Sarah felt both relief and tremendous pressure. She had won the right to continue her work, but now the entire galaxy would be watching to see if a human doctor could truly understand and improve upon alien military traditions. 6 months into the trial period, Sarah's medical bay had transformed into something unprecedented in the Academy's history. What had once been a sterile, efficient treatment center now resembled a hybrid between a rehabilitation facility and a warrior training ground. The change hadn't happened overnight. After the board meeting, Sarah had realized that truly integrating her medical approach with Zelani culture required more than just treating injuries differently. It required reimagining what strength meant in a military context. Working closely with Instructor Kethvar, Sarah had developed a comprehensive program that she privately called Warrior Wellness. The program combined advanced medical treatment with traditional Zelani endurance training, creating a system where healing and strengthening happened simultaneously. The medical bay now featured specialized equipment designed to allow injured cadets to maintain their physical conditioning while recovering. Zelani cadets could perform modified versions of their traditional strength exercises, even while undergoing treatment for serious injuries. More importantly, Sarah had instituted what she called silent teaching sessions, individual consultations where cadets learned about their bodies, their injuries, and proper prevention techniques without having to admit weakness publicly. These sessions maintained the Zelani preference for privacy while ensuring comprehensive education. The results had been remarkable. Cadet Threnka, now fully recovered and serving as a peer mentor, had become the unofficial ambassador for the program. His success had encouraged other Zelani cadets to seek treatment earlier, leading to a cascade of improved outcomes. But the real test came during the Academy's annual Crucible, a grueling 4-day survival and combat exercise that pushed cadets to their absolute limits. It was designed to simulate the worst possible battlefield conditions and traditionally resulted in numerous injuries and several career-ending incidents. This year would be different. For the first time, cadets participating in the Crucible had access to Sarah's integrated medical support system. Instead of hiding injuries and pushing through pain that could cause permanent damage, they could receive immediate, discreet treatment that allowed them to continue the exercise safely. Sarah had spent weeks preparing for the Crucible, working with Kethvar to design mobile medical stations that could provide sophisticated care while maintaining the exercise's challenging atmosphere. The stations were staffed by senior cadets who had been trained in Sarah's methods, creating a peer support system that honored Zelani cultural preferences. As the Crucible began, Sarah monitored progress from the main medical command center, coordinating with the mobile stations and tracking cadet health data in real time. The technology allowed her to identify developing problems before they became critical, enabling preventive intervention rather than emergency treatment. The first major test came on day 2 when a group of Zilani cadets encountered unexpected terrain that resulted in several injuries. Under the old system, the cadets would have attempted to hide their injuries and continue the exercise, likely resulting in more serious damage. Instead, the cadets signaled for medical support and were evaluated by their trained peers. 2 were cleared to continue with minor treatment, while a third was identified as having a potentially serious injury, requiring Sarah's personal attention. Cadet Morven had suffered what appeared to be a minor fall, but the mobile station's diagnostic equipment revealed signs of internal bleeding similar to what Sarah had first seen with Threnka. Under the old protocols, Morven would have continued the exercise until collapsing from blood loss. Sarah's immediate response demonstrated the effectiveness of her integrated approach. Rather than evacuating Morven from the exercise in shame, she performed emergency stabilization at the mobile station and then arranged for discreet transportation to the medical bay for definitive treatment. Crucially, Morven's team was allowed to continue the exercise with temporary replacement personnel, and Morven himself would be able to rejoin them once his treatment was complete. The system preserved both his medical health and his military honor. Word of the successful intervention spread quickly through the exercise area. Other cadets began reporting minor injuries and receiving treatment that prevented escalation to major problems. For the first time in the Crucible's history, no cadet suffered a career-ending injury. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. On day 3, Admiral Threshka himself arrived at the Medical Command Center for an unannounced inspection. Sarah had been expecting periodic evaluations, but the Admiral's personal visit suggested something more significant. "Dr. Chen," the Admiral began formally, "I have been receiving reports from the field commanders about the medical support during this exercise." Sarah braced herself, uncertain whether the reports had been positive or negative. "The injury rate is down 60% from previous years," Admiral Threshka continued. "More significantly, cadet performance scores are up across all metrics. This suggests that your medical support is not making our cadets weaker, it is making them more effective." Relief flooded through Sarah, but she could see that Admiral Threshka had more to say. "However, I am not here merely to acknowledge statistics," he said. "I am here because of something else I have observed." The Admiral activated a personal display showing video footage from the exercise. Sarah watched as Zilani cadets helped injured teammates reach medical stations, supported each other during treatment, and worked together to maintain unit cohesion despite injuries. "This," Admiral Threshka said, pointing to the display, "represents a fundamental shift in how our cadets approach adversity. They are no longer hiding weakness. They are strategically managing challenges to maintain operational effectiveness." Sarah realized what the Admiral was seeing. Her medical approach hadn't just improved individual health outcomes, it had enhanced unit cohesion and tactical thinking. "Dr. Chen, I believe I owe you an apology," Admiral Threshka said formally. "I viewed your methods as a threat to our traditions. I now understand that they represent an evolution of our traditions." The statement was extraordinary coming from such a senior Zilani officer, but Admiral Threshka wasn't finished. "I am recommending to the Academy Board that your integrated medical approach be adopted as the standard protocol for all Zilani cadets. Furthermore, I am requesting that you develop training programs to teach these methods to medical staff throughout the Zilani military." As the Crucible concluded with unprecedented success rates and 0 serious injuries, Sarah realized that her quiet work in the medical bay had grown into something much larger. She had not only proven that human medical practices could enhance alien military culture, she had demonstrated the power of compassionate innovation to create positive change throughout an entire society. The wounded cub who had stumbled into her care months ago had become the catalyst for transforming how an entire species approached strength, healing, and honor. 1 year after the Academy Board meeting, Sarah found herself standing before the Galactic Medical Council on Proxima Station, the most prestigious medical institution in known space. The invitation to present her work had come as a surprise, but the implications were staggering. If her methods were adopted galaxy-wide, they could revolutionize military medicine across all species. The council chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of civilizations, each bringing their own medical traditions and cultural perspectives. Sarah recognized several prominent figures, including Dr. Zephyr 9, the famous Andromedan surgeon whose crystalline body gleamed under the chamber's lights, and healer Prime Thorngaze of the Verdanian Collective, whose plant-based physiology made them one of the most respected medical minds in the galaxy. What made Sarah most nervous, however, was the presence of several military representatives, including Fleet Admiral Korath of the Draconic Empire and General Supreme Vexshiel of the Titan Corps. These were beings whose species had military traditions even more rigid than the Zilani. As Sarah prepared her presentation, she reflected on how much had changed since that first day with Threnka. The young cadet was now a senior instructor at the academy, helping to train new cohorts in the integrated medical military approach that had become standard for Zilani forces. His success story had become legendary throughout the academy, but more importantly, the ripple effects of Sarah's work had spread far beyond the Zilani. Other species at the academy had begun requesting similar integrated medical support. The Krillian delegation had noted improved outcomes when their cadets received Sarah's compassionate care, while the normally individualistic Zenari had embraced the peer support aspects of her program. Dr. Chen began her presentation with a holographic display showing comparative injury statistics from before and after implementing her protocols. The numbers were striking. Not only had serious injuries decreased dramatically, but overall performance across all metrics had improved substantially. Traditional military medicine across most species focuses on rapid return to duty, Sarah explained to the assembled delegates. While this approach has value, it often sacrifices long-term health and capability for short-term operational availability. She advanced to the next display, showing detailed case studies from multiple species. The integrated approach recognizes that optimal military effectiveness requires treating warriors as complete beings rather than simple mechanical systems. Fleet Admiral Korath, whose reptilian features were known for their intimidating expressiveness, leaned forward with obvious skepticism. Dr. Chen, the draconic military tradition emphasizes individual strength and self-reliance. How does your compassionate approach align with the need for warriors who can function independently in hostile environments? Sarah had been expecting this question. The Draconic Empire had one of the most demanding military cultures in the galaxy, where showing weakness was considered not just shameful but dangerous to unit cohesion. Admiral, my research indicates that true self-reliance actually requires comprehensive self-knowledge, Sarah replied. Warriors who understand their bodies, know their limitations, and can make informed decisions about risk management are more effective in independent operations than those who simply ignore problems until they become critical. She displayed video footage from recent draconic training exercises where cadets trained under Sarah's protocols had outperformed traditionally trained counterparts in solo survival scenarios. The difference was remarkable. While traditional cadets pushed through problems until they collapsed, integrated trained cadets had managed their resources and capabilities strategically, achieving better results with less risk. General Supreme Vexshiel, whose massive cybernetic form dominated one corner of the chamber, spoke in their characteristic digital monotone. Statistical evidence is compelling. However, concern remains regarding cultural disruption. Titan core efficiency relies on elimination of weakness. How does encouragement of medical dependency align with this requirement? Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that this was the crucial moment of her presentation. General, I would like to introduce you to someone who can answer that question better than I can. The chamber's main screen activated, showing a live feed from the Galactic Military Academy. Admiral Threshka appeared, flanked by Instructor Kethvar and several other senior Zilani officers. Honored delegates, Admiral Threshka began. I am here to provide testimony regarding Dr. Chen's medical protocols from the perspective of the Zilani Military Command. A murmur went through the chamber. The Zilani were known for their reluctance to discuss military matters with outsiders, making Admiral Threshka's appearance highly significant. 1 year ago, I viewed Dr. Chen's methods as a threat to our traditions, the Admiral continued. Today, I am here to report that her approach has strengthened our traditions beyond anything we previously achieved. Admiral Threshka activated, his own display showing performance metrics from Zilani forces throughout the galaxy. Zilani units trained under integrated medical protocols show 15% improvement in mission success rates, 30% reduction in casualties, and a remarkable 40% improvement in long-term service retention. The numbers were extraordinary, but Admiral Threshka wasn't finished. More importantly, our warriors report higher satisfaction, greater confidence in their abilities, and stronger unit cohesion. Dr. Chen's methods have not made us weaker. They have made us the most effective fighting force in Zilani history. Instructor Kethvar stepped forward. If I may add a personal observation, I have served in the Zilani military for 37 years. I have never seen warriors as capable, as confident, or as resilient as those trained under Dr. Chen's protocols. The testimony from such respected Zilani officers clearly had impact on the assembled delegates. Sarah could see attitudes shifting as beings reconsidered their initial skepticism. Dr. Zephyr Nine's crystalline voice chimed through the chamber. The Andromedan Medical Collective has reviewed Dr. Chen's research extensively. The scientific methodology is sound, the results are replicable, and the applications extend far beyond military medicine. Healer Prime Thorngaze rustled their leaves in agreement. The Verdanian Collective concurs. Dr. Chen's approach represents a fundamental advancement in cross-species medical care. As the discussion continued, Sarah realized that something unprecedented was happening. Representatives from species that rarely agreed on anything were finding common ground in the effectiveness of her compassionate approach to medicine. Fleet Admiral Korath spoke again, but this time his tone had shifted. Dr. Chen, the Draconic Empire would be interested in conducting pilot programs with our elite units. If your methods can improve Draconic military effectiveness, we are prepared to adapt our traditions accordingly. Similar statements came from around the chamber, as representative after representative expressed interest in implementing Sarah's protocols within their own military systems. As the session concluded, Sarah felt both pride and overwhelming responsibility. What had started as a simple desire to help one injured cadet had grown into a galaxy-wide medical revolution. But more than that, it had proven that human values of compassion and understanding could enhance rather than conflict with the military traditions of radically different species. The final vote was unanimous. The Galactic Medical Council formally adopted Sarah's integrated approach as the recommended standard for military medicine across all member species. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her new office aboard the medical research vessel Compassionate Warrior, watching the stars stream past as they traveled to their next assignment. The ship was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, designed by Andromedan engineers, powered by draconic energy systems, and staffed by medical personnel from 23 different species. Sarah's title had evolved as much as her responsibilities. She was now the Director of Integrated Medical Sciences for the Galactic Alliance, overseeing the implementation of compassionate military medicine across hundreds of worlds. But despite all the honors and recognition, she often found herself thinking about where it all began, with a wounded Zilani cadet who had been too proud to ask for help. The door chimed, and Sarah turned to see a familiar figure entering her office. Threnka, now Commander Threnka, had grown into one of the most respected officers in the Zilani military. His silver skin bore the ceremonial markings of a senior instructor, and his bearing radiated the confidence of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. "Commander," Sarah said warmly, "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow's briefing. I wanted to speak with you privately before the ceremony," Threnka replied, his voice carrying the formal tone that Zilani used for matters of great importance. "Dr. Chen, I have something to tell you that I should have said years ago." Sarah gestured for him to sit, curious about what could require such formality from someone who had become not just a patient, but a trusted colleague and friend. "When you first treated me," Threnka began, "I believed you were simply doing your job as a physician. It took me years to understand that what you did was far more significant." He paused, gathering his thoughts in the careful way of his species. "You saw a wounded being who needed help, and you provided that help without judgment, without conditions, and without demanding that I abandon my culture or values. You found a way to heal me that made me stronger rather than diminishing who I was." Sarah felt emotion welling up as Threnka continued. But more than that, you taught me something that has shaped everything I have done since. That true strength comes not from denying weakness, but from facing it with wisdom and courage. Threnka stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. I have trained thousands of cadets using the principles you taught me. Each of them carries those lessons forward to others. Your compassion has become a living thing, growing and spreading throughout the galaxy. Threnka, Sarah said softly, I was just doing what felt right. I never imagined it would lead to all of this. That is exactly why it succeeded, he replied, turning back to face her. You acted from genuine care for my well-being, not from any agenda or desire for recognition. That authenticity is what allowed me to trust you, and that trust became the foundation for everything that followed. The next day's ceremony was held in the ship's main assembly hall, filled with representatives from across the galaxy who had come to witness the formal establishment of the Compassionate Warrior Medical Institute. The institute would serve as a training center and research facility, spreading Sarah's integrated approach to new species and developing advanced applications of compassionate medicine. As Sarah prepared to address the assembled delegates, she reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. The shy human doctor who had once felt out of place among alien warriors had become someone that beings from across the galaxy addressed with profound respect. But the moment that meant the most came just before her speech, when Admiral Threshka approached the podium to introduce her. The proud Zilani officer, whose species rarely showed deference to outsiders, did something unprecedented. Fellow beings, Admiral Threshka announced, his voice carrying throughout the hall. It is my honor to introduce Director Chen. However, before I present her title and accomplishments, I must share something more important. The hall fell silent as the Admiral continued. Among my people, there is a term we use for those who demonstrate the highest form of warrior virtue, those who protect the vulnerable, heal the wounded, and strengthen others without seeking personal gain. We call such individuals soul-forged warriors. Admiral Threshka turned to face Sarah directly. Dr. Chen, you have earned something that no non-Zilani has ever received, the recognition of our entire military hierarchy as a true soul-forged warrior. From this day forward, when you walk among any Zilani military unit, you will be addressed not as doctor, but as ma'am, the highest honor we can bestow. The hall erupted in approving sounds from dozens of species, Krillian harmonic buzzing, Zenari melodic chimes, draconic rumbles of respect, and many others. But it was the sight of every Zilani present, from cadets to senior officers, standing at attention in perfect silence that truly conveyed the magnitude of the honor. As Sarah stepped up to speak, she looked out at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization and felt the weight of responsibility that came with their trust. But she also felt something else, the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing that her work had made a difference. My fellow beings, she began, when I first arrived at the Galactic Military Academy, I thought my role would be to treat injuries and send warriors back to duty. I never imagined that healing could become a bridge between species, or that compassion could strengthen military traditions rather than weakening them. She gestured toward the viewport where stars wheeled past in the eternal dance of the cosmos. Today, as we establish this institute, we commit ourselves to the principle that true strength comes not from hiding our vulnerabilities, but from facing them with wisdom, courage, and the support of those who care about our well-being. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued. We have proven that compassionate medicine does not create weakness. It reveals strength that was always there. We have shown that honoring cultural traditions while embracing beneficial change leads to outcomes superior to either approach alone. As her speech concluded, Sarah looked directly at Threnka, whose proud stance embodied everything she had hoped to achieve. The wounded cub who once stumbled into my care has become a commander, who leads with both strength and wisdom. This transformation represents not just individual success, but proof that when we treat each other with dignity and compassion, we all become more than we ever thought possible. The ceremony ended with the traditional Zilani moment of silence, a practice that had been adopted by many other species as a way to honor those who had been healed and those who did the healing. In that silence, Sarah felt the presence of every being she had ever treated, every life that had been improved and every tradition that had been strengthened through the simple act of caring. When the silence ended, Admiral Threshkaw's voice rang out one final time. Long live the Compassionate Warrior Institute. Long live the spirit of healing that unites us all. As beings from across the galaxy began to disperse, planning how to implement compassionate medicine within their own cultures, Sarah realized that her greatest achievement wasn't the awards or recognition. It was the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, wounded beings would find not just medical treatment, but the dignity and respect that would help them heal not just physically, but as complete individuals. The wounded cub had indeed made it to the front, not just to the front lines of battle, but to the forefront of a new understanding of what it truly meant to be strong.